All right, it's Carl Tepper, Dave King, and Scott Braddock from the Quorum Report. Scott, I get in trouble with my Republican friends because I say that I think you do a pretty fair and good analysis of the politics of Texas, but, I guess it depends on who you're talking about that day. How are you?
Well, there are Democrats who would get upset if you said that as well. I feel like if the Democrats and Republicans are always a little miffed at me, I'm probably doing this right.
I think you are doing it right. I really enjoy
Thanks, man.
when I get to hear you on Fridays. I think you give me kind of the rundown on pretty much everything I need to know or already knew, and you just kind of reinforced it.
Well, here I am.
Hey, Carl.
Yes, sir.
Can we mention to Scott that Dave King here, Scott, and we mentioned that Carl is covering for Matt Martin, who is home battling the COVID, and he's doing very well. But we expect him to come back, hopefully later next week sometime.
Okay, well, I hope have him in my thoughts. I just learned that this morning as well, that he contracted the coronavirus, and it's something hitting closer to home for more people now as it continues to spread. And you saw what's going on in El Paso. There's an argument going on there about more restrictions in place, and the Attorney General tweeting last night that what the local government's doing to try to respond is in contradiction to what Governor Abbott has laid out. So a big mess as far as the response and affecting more people in Texas.
So the governor is rolling back some of the freedoms we've been given here in Lubbock. Is that going on in other parts of the states as well? He's going to, now the mayor here has dictated that we can't meet in groups of 10 or more. And I think the governor has rolled back the 50%, the 75% capacity for restaurants. He's rolled it back to 50%. Are we the only ones getting hit, or is Amarillo or Tyler or anyone else getting hit as well?
They're looking at some of these different hot spots. I mentioned El Paso. You're talking about the restrictions there in Lubbock. Those seem to be the big ones for the moment, although, the numbers have been ticking up, particularly in South Texas and a couple of other places, so it's worth keeping an eye on this. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of people who feel that the governor is, clamping down on people's freedoms. I think it's legit to feel that way. I think the real question here, moving forward from a public policy perspective, is do you allow one person, the governor, to do that, moving forward? The governor has certainly tested, and we've talked about this here on the show many times, but I know it's a topic people are interested in. The governor has really tested the extent to which executive power really exists, under disaster powers. There's a Disaster Powers Act in Texas that allows him to act unilaterally when there is some sort of a crisis going on. But the question I keep hearing from Republicans and Democrats alike, it's a bipartisan sentiment. People will say, and these are legislators, staffers, and others who have said, does the governor really need to have that kind of power moving forward, or should he be checked by the legislature, which is, of course, the branch of government that's closer to the people? And by closer to the people, I mean they stand for re-election more often and actually represent all of the diverse number of communities around the state. And, of course, all the different places have different, feelings about these things, different ideologies, different, makeups of their community. And so, I would be one of those who would say that probably does need to have legislative review. I mean, within reason, let the governor act, for a month or 90 days or something. But then at some point, you could have something that could be even put into the Texas Constitution that would say he can do certain things for a while, and then the legislature either, is called into session or is automatically called into session to make sure to review it and figure out if that's what the state really needs to be doing going forward.
So, Scott, he's inching closer and closer into a session that he has to have.
That's right.
And so, I've heard from some legislators that this is going to be, a number one issue for them. And I've heard from some other people who hang around those circles that this is going to be a session where they're going to go in, pass a budget, and leave. I find that hard to believe. How do you think it's going to fall out?
There are sources in the governor's office who have indicated that the policy shop there wants to and has been directed to take a look at one of those shorter sessions that you mentioned, 45 days or so, just do the budget and that's it. But according to the Constitution, as you allude to, this is the shot that legislators have at oversight of the executive branch. Every 2 years for 140 days, lawmakers get to come together and deliberate what laws we all live under. That's the system that we have. and COVID. COVID-19, coronavirus, of course, as we said, it's affecting people's lives, and it's got a lot of people concerned about their health, of course. But I don't think what a lot of people want to see, and again, it's bipartisan, I don't think a lot of people want to see them use that as some sort of cover for not doing their jobs. There are things that they could do to deliberate and do it smartly and do it safely, and I think that most Texans, if you ask them, would probably say they want the lawmakers, whether they are Republicans or Democrats, to get in there and do their job, provide oversight of what the governor's doing, and then also take a good hard look at what our public policy needs to be when it comes to these pandemics, because, in an ever more interconnected world, it's more possible that we will have more of these. I mean, we do have, so much international travel. We do have so much international commerce that goes on that in some ways it's surprising that this didn't happen already. There were other efforts, previously under the Obama administration and the last Bush administration to take a good hard look at what our response should be and what our plan should be when one of these pandemics happens. And obviously they didn't get very far down the road with that, because look, here we are. This has not gone that well.
So I'm hearing rumors that there are some people who are concerned about the Texas House of Representatives going Democratic this cycle. I don't see it, but what are you hearing on the street?
I've been traveling the state, and it's been an abbreviated version of what I usually do. Usually by this time I have put thousands of miles on my truck, just driving all over, checking out all these different competitive races in different districts around the state. I was in Dallas-Fort Worth over the last couple of weeks, same thing in Houston. That's where the biggest concentration of these races are, in those two places in Southeast Texas and the Metroplex. And I can tell you that if the Democrats are going to win the majority, which I do think is possible, right now I would sort of peg it at a coin flip situation. Could go one way or the other. I won't wake up on Wednesday and be surprised at either outcome. If Republicans are able to hold on to the majority, won't shock me. Same thing if the Democrats are able to take the majority. I mean, there's just so much uncertainty right now. This was just reported just a little while ago that Texas has surpassed its entire vote total for 2016. And we still have basically a full day here of early voting and Election Day left to go. We now have more than 9 million votes that have been cast. The all-time record in Texas is about 8.9 million. So this is a massive turnout. What that means for the actual election results, we'll see. I've said this a few times. I'll say it again. There are more Republican voters in Texas than there are Democratic voters. That's true until it's not. And, by Tuesday night we'll have some idea as to whether or not that's true. We do see in certain parts of the state, and I think this is why the House is particularly competitive. And Carl, I think this is why it's possible that President Trump will carry Texas. That's what I expect. I think he will win, maybe by 3 or 4 points. Even Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has revised down his estimate. Patrick had said,
I'm calling 15 points. I'm serious.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
I am. It was 9 points.
points.
It was 9 points 4 years ago. I'm calling 15 points this year.
I'm writing down Tepper for 15. All right, you're in the pool.
And I want really good odds.
We'll see how you do. Lieutenant Governor Patrick had said for months, almost for a year, that he thought the president would do better than he did in 2016. And remember, he won by 9 points in 2016 over Secretary Clinton. That would mean that the lieutenant governor expects double digits. But just this week, he told a television station here in Austin that he now expects it to be somewhere between a 4-point race and an 8-point race. And I would give the lieutenant governor credit certainly for one thing, which is he knows how to read polls better than anybody, and that means he's not just looking at polls that have been put out there publicly, like the Quinnipiac poll or the New York Times poll, which the Times poll, by the way, did have President Trump up about 5 or 6 points. But the lieutenant governor, I'm sure, must have some internal polling of his own that he's looking at when he says something like that.
So this MJ Hegar lady annoys the heck out of me. I remember when she was running.
She annoys you?
Yeah, she really. I remember she was running against John Carter in Williamson County for Congress, and then next thing I know, she's running a statewide race for U.S. Senate. She's done a good job. I mean, she's got a lot of TV ads up. I guess she raised the money.
A lot of money.
I don't see that either. I see John Cornyn has always been a steady hand. Republicans, love him or hate him. He's been a strong hand for Texas. He's the majority whip. I just don't see his support flailing away to a loss.
Yeah, look, when you're looking at polling in a primary election back, in March, what you kind of want to do is look and see how, behind or ahead of your opponent you are. When you're in a general election in November and you're looking at polls, you want to look at how close the person is to 50. John Cornyn, our senior senator, as you said, I think has been a pretty steady hand, and he's talked a lot about that, by the way, over the last couple of weeks, talking about how his opposition sometimes to President Trump has been handled behind closed doors, which is actually, and some people tried to say, well, it means he's distancing himself from Trump, and some folks who are Trump supporters had said, well, that means he's some kind of a rhino. So you really can't win in that situation when you're talking about the legislative process and the way it works. But the fact is, when you do have folks who are in the same party, these are both Republicans, and they don't have, or they do have something that they don't agree about, a lot of times they'll try to handle that privately before they go public with some.
Scott, we're on a break. Hang on. I have to jump in here. As a matter of fact, John Cornyn is going to be here today at the Silent Wings Museum. I think it's at 11:30. Correct me, Matt, if I'm wrong on that. And let's take a quick break. We'll talk to you, Scott, at the backside of this. All right. Dave King, Carl Tepper sitting in for Matt Martin, and Scott Braddock with the Quorum Report. I need to make a correction real quick. Senator Cornyn will be here today, but he'll be at the American Windmill Museum. On Canyon Lake Drive down there by Mackenzie Park. 11:30 a.m., the American Windmill Museum. So just that side note. Scott, we've got a flurry of people filing for Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Some Democrats, which I found interesting too, at least one. What is there? I know you don't want to say it. Is there a favorite? I shouldn't even ask that. But is there a favorite? And is there?
Let's do it.
Is there a Bonin favorite? And does that hurt them in this atmosphere right now?
There is a Bonin favorite probably out there, a stalking horse somewhere, but they have not announced yet. None of the members who have announced on the Republican side so far are any of those that I would consider to be a Bonin favorite or among the Boninites, if you will, which is the way some of those folks have put it, here in Austin. But I think on the Democratic side, and this is interesting, earlier in the week, you mentioned this flurry of filings for Speaker. They all happened yesterday, most of them. Before that, there were only two Democrats who had filed, Senfronia Thompson, who is a longtime legislator from Houston, very well respected by Republicans and Democrats alike, and Trey Martinez-Fisher, who's a Democrat from San Antonio, another longtime legislator who has legislative chops from decades of being in the House of Representatives. And so there was a lot of question earlier in the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, people were starting to wonder, why haven't any Republicans filed here? What's going on? And to your question earlier about whether the Texas House, the majority could flip to the Democrats, there was, I had talked to some Republicans who said that it was a mix of two things. One, you do have sort of warring factions within the Republican caucus, those more Bonin loyalists who are still there, and then you have others who are in the not Bonin group, other Republicans who have a different idea about how the House ought to be run. So is it really about, was the hesitance by Republicans really about that disagreement within the Republican caucus, or is it about the idea that maybe they're nervous that they won't be in the majority, and so why file for Speaker anyway? And some Republicans had said, well, it's actually kind of a mix of both. Now we see some Republicans coming to the fore, and we see some mainly rural Republicans who have stepped up. Chris Patty from East Texas, as well as Trent Ashby, who's from Lufkin, also in East Texas. A couple of the names that have been floated out there. And we have John Cyrier from the Austin area. There's a few Republicans who are now in the mix. Cyrier, of all of those, would be the most Bonin aligned, if you will. But other than that, I think we're going to see some more announcements potentially this weekend. It's my understanding there's another meeting of some Republican legislators coming up this Sunday to once again discuss this. Although
Scott, that's what I needed to know. Thank you. We're out of time.
They're running out of time, just like we are. We'll talk to you soon.
Man, great job.